Hey guys, this is Justin back with an engineer's perspective, and a viewer asked me to do a video on steeling your knives, or honing them really. So this is that. Right off the bat, there's going to be two kind of hones that you're going to run into. Kind of the classical steeling steel, a steel. And then there's the ceramic, which is becoming increasingly popular. So first, let's talk about the steel. This particular one is kind of a fancier one. It's an F-Dick Dickeron 12-inch sapphire cut here. On it, you may be able to notice that it's got these ridges on it. And I recommend that you get one that does have it, not a smooth one, which is called like a butcher's steel. So get one that has ridges on it. And basically the purpose of this is that when you're using a knife, is microscopically at the edge, there's going to be some waviness and some actual rolling. The kind of lined up, teeth that you're sharpening into it will get a little bit kind of like this. So when you're using that steel and you're pressing it along the knife there, or running the knife along it rather, it's going to kind of push those teeth back into line, correct those waves, unroll, straighten out a burr, sort of a thing. And this sort of a thing really isn't removing material for all intents and purposes. It's strictly just kind of realigning the edge, and there will be an increase in perceived sharpness from this up to the point that basically you've worked that edge back and forth so many times that it essentially just breaks off, at which point you need to sharpen it on a stone. There's different kind of coarsenesses or aggressiveness of these kind of serrations in there, these grooves that run this direction. So there's like a coarse, there's regular, and there's fine, and each brand is different. But if you're gonna buy one of these, you should be buying F-Dick. They make the best ones, hands down. You can get an F-Dick Euro cut 12-inch, which is basically as good a steel as you can get for like $23. It just has a black plastic handle instead of this, kind of fun one. And you will be squared away. There's no reason to buy a cheap steel. The quality, you'd be better off if you had a $100 budget. Instead of buying a $90 knife and a $10 steel, you would be better off to buy a $50 knife and a $50 steel. So that's how important a steel is with German cutlery, okay? Because the performance of knives in general comes down to maintenance, number one, and then skill. So you have to maintain the knife, and for German cutlery, a steel is absolutely key. So I think that's kind of the features of the steel. Now let's talk about the ceramic hone. So these can come in a variety of grits. I've seen them, well, first off, let's just say diamond encrusted ones, garbage, trash. Don't touch that with a 10-foot pole. Never, ever, ever. That out of the way, they come in a variety of grits. The ceramics seem to range from like 800 grit up to 5K-ish. This one here is 3K rated, and it is an Idaho ceramic. And not all ceramics are created equal. So there's the different grit ratings, but just general quality. So make sure you get a quality one. Once again, very important. This Idaho right here is made in the United States, 12 inches. I think that's a 1/2 inch diameter for like $30. And you can get it with a wood handle if you prefer that over this black plastic. So there's no reason to cheap out on either of these things when you can get such a high quality one for such a reasonable price. These guys will remove material. Now, depending on the grit rating, that will vary. But even at a 3K, if you're really off on your angle, So like if this is the angle of your knife, and instead of matching it perfectly, if you're hitting it like that, you can create a burr, which is not my preference with honing. I don't like creating a burr. So note that it will do that. And my general rule of thumb for these is finer is better. So I recommend the Idaho, but get as fine a grit as you like. I don't recommend the 800 grit stuff, those coarser grit stuff. So when to use one versus the other, general rule of thumb is for Japanese knives that are 60 Rockwell or higher, you're going to want to use a ceramic. And for German style knives that are 59 Rockwell and lower, you're going to want to use the steel. So there's a little bit of caveat to that, and a little nuance, but generally that's how you can kind of follow that. Yeah, let's get into it a little bit. So I've got the, Messermeister Meridian Elite Stealth 8-inch chef knife here. So there's kind of three styles, the way I see it, that you can use the steel. I would like to note, many of these have these guards, and for one, they're good if you're, moving the blade towards yourself. So good to have a guard there. But the other thing is, if you're using them what's probably the most proper way, they're really handy, and that's going to be the first way, we'll just tip down. So the best way to use these is to just stick it tip down. If you're on a slidey surface, do it on like your cutting board, then it won't be as slidey, or throw a wet rag or whatever. I don't really care. Doesn't really matter. And you're just gonna hold it straight up and down, and then you're gonna match your angle if you're able to do that, which is part of the struggle. But roughly, just to kind of get you in the ballpark, is, that's 90 degrees, half that's 22 and a half, or sorry, 90, 45, and then 22 and a half. So you can kind of do 90, then have it and have that. That gets you in the ballpark. But the other thing is these guards is different styles of steels will have different size guards, but generally speaking, there will be kind of a wide side and a thin side. Now, if you're good at geometry, you can measure the height of your knife and the width of this and correspond that to an angle. But the different heights of knives will have different angles and all that good jazz, but it gives you an idea. But generally speaking, that wider side on a chef's knife will be in the ballpark of 20 to 25 degrees, and the thinner side will generally be in the ballpark of like 10 to 15 degrees. So it gives you an idea roughly. But I know that on the Dickeron here that I go to about right there on my guard to get the right angle. So if I hold it straight up and down, I just go from heel to tip, and then I switch sides, heel to tip. With this, it's best to have, if you do one perfect pass per side, that's better than like 80 bad passes per side. General rule. So this is one way. It's still a little tricky for me to feel the proper angle this way, but it's very controlled, and you got some good visual cues to work from. So that's way number one. Way number two is like the chef on the TV shows, hold it in your hand and then, draw it like this. So that's number one. For me personally, this is at some random angle, and then I'm trying to correspond this angle, and usually I can match this correctly on this side, but on the back side, I have like no muscle memory of what the angle should be. And what I always end up doing is hitting the apex really hard, and sometimes I'll even round it, or not round it, but I'll fold it over. So I have a really hard time matching the angles like this. So that's one, is to go, work your way like that. And then the third one, which is probably actually my preference but looks the dumbest, is I'll take it and I'll actually lay it on the table. And then this way I can feel the shoulder of it. And when I do it, I'm not coming stiff and raising my elbow like I would for sharpening, is I'm rolling through the wrist. And then I find my angle this side. I'm just gonna roll. I move my elbow some, but I'm rolling through the wrist a little bit. And that's the easiest way for me to match the angle exactly, because it's the most similar to how I'm used to sharpening on a stone. So that's how I like to do it. That's my personal preference. And that way it's not sliding around, and then I'm actually able to match the angle versus that. You can do like edge trailing, but I haven't found a big difference. Some people say edge trailing, some say edge leading. Everybody has success doing it either way. I don't know if it really matters. But I think my recommendation, well, I know it's what I do, is edge leading. And if you want to do edge trailing, it would be like edge trailing, then edge leading, edge leading. That would be my recommendation. So one other thing on this is going to be more forgiving than the ceramic, because if you hit that angle too high on the ceramic, you've just put on a micro bevel, and you've got a burr to go right along with that. So this is where I would steer people first, assuming if you're that inexperienced that you're probably working with German cutlery, hopefully. But I did want to throw this tip out, is if you really are struggling to hit that angle and you don't want to look like a doofus, like you're in a kitchen and you want to look cool doing it, this is my recommendation. So take a dang good guess at your angle and do that. So let's say I just did it like 5 degrees too high on accident. So do your too high of an angle several passes, and now when you come into this one, lower it down a little bit. And chances are, if you keep lowering it down on your finishing strokes, is one of those times you're gonna hit the correct angle, if that makes sense. So let's say the true angle is 17 degrees per side. It'd be like, 22, and then I would do 20, and then it'd be 17, 15. So I don't have perfect angle control, and I'm not hitting it correctly, but eventually you will. And then once you go lower than that, then the edge doesn't touch the steel anymore. And I've actually gotten pretty good results doing that. So, if you're struggling with hitting that angle correctly, that's my recommendation. Start too high and work your way as you stroke through lower, and end up doing like 5 per side or something. So that way, even if your angle's off, you'll get close-ish. Yeah, I kind of already spoke to this creating a burr. Right now, the steel is definitely, there's some junk on this thing. The steel is definitely my preference because I don't like creating a burr. And in that, the burr will create an aggressive edge, but I've never been into aggressive edges via having a burr on it, so that's not what I'm about. But I am experimenting with this again. I've done it several times, but it's back in my kitchen in the knife block to continue experimenting with, and I don't hate it. So yeah, it is what it is. It's fine, but just follow that initial rule of thumb I threw out, and you'll be okay. Yeah, that's kind of some information, and then my personal technique for using them. And generally speaking, with German knives, is you should be steeling every day. Every day you use the knife, you should be steeling it. So when I take this out, I take this out. So pretty much every use, I'll use it. And then depending on the hardness of the knife and the geometry and your use, you might need to be doing this between tomatoes if you're like a line cook. Or if it's much harder, then maybe, once a day. Or, if you're at home, then maybe you can get away with doing it once a month, but don't do that. That's bad. The key to this is to not let your knife go dull. So just use this baby on your German knives every time you use the knife. So when you take it out of the block, use it. And then before you put it back in, use it, and then you're done. And so for German knives, I steel daily, strop weekly, take it to the stones monthly. And with Japanese knives, I don't really use this, but I'm trying it out right now. And it would be more like using this just whenever they need it, which would be maybe weekly, but I tend to strop weekly and take it to the stones monthly for Japanese knives. So I'm still figuring out exactly how this one rolls. But I hope that answered your questions and what you needed to know. And so that's all I got for you. Thanks for watching. Have a good one. Bye.